Okay, so um, I assume we probably have, well, I know, I can tell we have a wide range of musical knowledge and experience in this group. I'm trying to aim for pretty much entry level beginning. So if you're in the choir, you're already past that. Great. Or if you live with somebody who's in the choir. So that's fine. I see something here. um, so, and I'm also going to try and I'm going to give a pretty big picture here because this is something we could just spend, a year-long class in. But I think I have a way to present something that is really coherent and useful and gives you something that you can practice at home and benefit from in less than an hour. That's my goal. I have not presented this way before. If it seems difficult or overwhelming, blame me, okay? Do not blame yourself. You have complete permission to do that. So, sight singing is kind of what we're aiming for here. That's the goal. And sight singing means somebody can hand you a piece of music, just written sheet music, and you can look at it and you can sing it. And a lot of people maybe can already do that a little bit with musical instruments, but it's harder with your voice because you can't just press a key and have something come out like on a piano. And honestly, I've only recently started seriously working on this myself. It's never been a strength of mine, but this is kind of why I'm sort of excited about figuring out how to even approach it and being able to share it. Um, my my natural ear and just sense of pitches and intervals has never been inherently very strong. Some people it really is, even if they haven't been musically trained. Um, on the other hand, my mind really likes to find patterns and analyze things. And this is where music theory comes in. And I've been able to use that to kind of help me in the areas that I'm not so strong. And I believe this works the other direction as well. So hopefully, wherever you're coming to this from, we'll be able to put some pieces together and make something useful for this. It will be something that needs practice. I mean, you're not going to go out of this after an hour and just take a piece of music and sing it right off the bat, unless you can already do that. So I'm trying to just give something that will be something you can practice and get better at, as opposed to you're going to be a whiz at the end of the hour, just to set expectations. Okay, so music theory. My first premise is that you already know a lot of music theory, a lot more than you actually know. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to play you a tune, and I want you to raise your hand, just your physical hand, I can see you all, when I play a wrong note, okay? Aha, okay, I saw hands go up all over the place. Now, how did you know it was a wrong note? Have you ever heard this tune before? I don't think anybody's ever heard this before unless you're a fan of Swedish fiddle music. So maybe I wrote it that way. You don't know, right? But your mind has heard and your ears have heard enough music over the years that you know how music works. And all music theory is a study of the patterns of how music works. The music came first. Things sounded good, and people went, hey, that sounds good. We should give it a name so we can talk about it, so we can do it again, so we can share it with other people. And they started putting labels on it. Let me do a different kind of test. I'm going to sing 3 notes, and I want you just in the privacy of your own home, we can't hear you, sing the note that comes after it, okay? La, la, la. Now, I can't hear you, but I'm assuming most of you sang la. You heard, and you knew it had to go there. Why did you know it had to go there? Did you study for years and know that, oh, this is a 1-4-5 progression, it always has to resolve back to the tonic and know all these fancy words? No, you listen to music and things make sense to you. So a lot of people get sort of scared of music theory because it sounds theoretical and academic and difficult and only for the elite intellectuals, but all it is a way of talking about music. And there's lots and lots of music theory, and a lot of it applies to music that we will never ever play or sing. If you get into jazz, it's so weird and it'll be completely useless to us. But we can learn the basics and actually really find some very, very useful patterns and things to pull out of it. Some of it's universal. So we all know the concept of an octave, right? Where that note is the same as that note. They're just in different octaves. And some things are actually based on physics, and that has to do with the frequency of the sound vibrations and how the octave up is exactly twice the frequency of the octave down. But a lot of it is also just based on culture and musical styles. So in Western music, we divide an octave into 12 different notes. In India, they go up to, I don't know, 20, 30 different notes, just tiny little divisions of it. And so they'll have a very different sort of music theory than we do, but there will be similarities. Okay, so music theory is basically vocabulary and patterns. So vocabulary is just so we can talk about it, and patterns is what is the music actually doing. Let's see, where am I going to start this? Okay, so let's start by talking about what key a piece of music is in. When you listen to a piece of music, there's usually one note that the music will come back to where it sounds like it's done, it's finished, it's resolved. And actually that's what happened when I played that example. Is this sounds like you really feel like you're hanging, right? Like, come on, play the last note already. And that note, whether you know that I happen to be playing a G on the mandolin or not, it doesn't matter. La is the key that we're in. It's the one that feels home, that feels done when you're there. It's usually the last note of a piece, the last note of the melody, not always, but most of the time. Often it's the first note of a piece of music, but not necessarily, because it's where you want to come home to. I'm going to assume people have a general sense of major versus minor keys. Is that right? Like, you sort of have a sense that this sounds different from this, and this is a major sort of a sound, and this is a minor sort of a sound. For simplicity's sake, we're going to just talk about major keys today. So if you hear a piece of music that sounds this kind of a feel, and it sounds major, then you just sort of hum what note sounds the most finished and done. La, that's the key you're in. And if you want to find it on an instrument and actually give it a name, that's fine. But for our purposes, we won't even be caring much today about what a literal note name is. But hearing it is important. Okay, so people noticed that when they played music that sounded good, it tended to revolve around a particular note. And so they said, okay, it's in the key of this note, and you can play it in the key of some other note, and it'll all revolve around that note. But then they noticed that whenever they play something that sounds like it's in a major key and revolves around a particular note, there was a specific set of other notes that went with it all the time. And so they go, okay, there's a pattern. We should figure out what this pattern is, and then we can like learn all our other scales really easily. This is called a scale. So let me see. Yeah, let me try and share my screen here, and the sound. I'm gonna be trying like all the technology here today, so it'll be fun. Okay, so I have a piano here, and this is largely just so that can everybody see it? I assume it looks like it's working. Okay, not because you have to play piano to do this, but because it's something that we can look at. Okay, and I assume you guys can hear this note like when I play it here. And I can't see you anymore now that I'm sharing my screen. So if you have questions, just unmute and shout it out. Okay, so the piano keyboard is divided into all these keys, white and black keys. And the distance between any two adjacent keys is sort of the smallest distance between any two notes. And we call this a half a step. And we'll see why it's a half step and not a whole step later. That is a half a step. And you may recognize it from such musical classics as there's your half step. And okay, so people go, okay, I'm playing something that's in the key of C. It sounds like it's major, and this is great. And every time I play like this, it has these same notes in it. Which we use this as an example because on a piano, they're all white keys. So it's really easy to just look at. And so they go, okay, what's the pattern here? Between C and the next note, there's a note in between, this black key. So this is a whole step because we decided to call the smallest one a half step. Here, it's another whole step because there's a black key in between. Look at this. There's no black key in here. And could you hear that this interval is a smaller interval than those two notes? The sounds are closer together. Keep going up. You can see we're skipping black keys again. So that's a whole step. Again, we skip another black key, there's a whole step. We skip another black key, that's a whole step. And at the very end, we have this half step. Again, there's no black key in here. And people went, well, that seems sort of an odd pattern here, but it sounds nice. And if you tried to just do something logical, like, oh, let's just make everything a whole step, like, why not? Why shouldn't it all be the same? That's what it sounds like. And, that's no fun. So again, the point is the music always comes first. The music sounds nice, so we're looking at it and going, okay, what is the music doing that makes it sound nice? Let's see, maybe I'll show my handout here. No, where is it? Okay, so I wrote this out like this. The W means it's a whole step, the half means it's a half step. Okay, and you can see again there's the no black key in there. And you can just train your ears, especially if you just practice with the piano, to listen to the difference and tell, oh, that was a tiny little difference between the notes or a slightly bigger difference. Now, the neat thing about patterns is you can take this whole pattern, and if somebody says, oh, I can't sing in this key, this note is too low for me, you can just start the pattern on a different note. So if I want to start on D, I can't just play all the white keys. Like, oh, that doesn't sound like a major scale anymore, right? Because it broke the pattern. I need two whole steps first. Whole step, another whole step, and the half step. And if I keep following the pattern, I have to use some of the black keys, which a piano player would care about. We're singers. Who cares? Like, we can sing it. We don't have to reach a different color key. It's no problem. But that pattern stays the same. So if you see these written out like with their note names, and I'm going to give you these handouts that I have. Here I just wrote the whole, whole, half pattern above C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. In the D major scale, it has some sharps and things in it, but the pattern is exactly the same. So the way I think of this is kind of like if you have a square, you just drew a square on your piece of paper. The thing that makes it a square is the fact that the sides are all the same length and the angles are right angles. And you could take that square and make it bigger, or you can make it smaller, but it's still a square. And I'm sitting here gesturing you like I have a square here that you can see, but you're still looking at my my screen. But the point is, it's the relationship of those sides of the square that make it a square. And if you make it bigger and the relationships are still the same, it's still a square. And if you put it over on this piece of paper instead of your first piece of paper, it's still a square. If you draw it in blue, it's still a square because the important relationships are the same. And so in music, the important relationships are the distances between the notes. Do you have those tiny little half-step intervals or the slightly larger whole-step intervals? Does that make sense, at least conceptually? Anybody want to ask a question? This is where sometimes people's eyes glaze over. And then if I'm not, if I'm sharing a screen, I don't notice. Um, okay, so here's where it gets a little bit, I think, magic. Because if you learn the C major scale and you learn that you play all the white keys on the piano, C to C, you get a C major scale, you learned one thing. If you learn this pattern of whole step, half step, and so on, you just learned 12 things. Because there are 12 notes, and you can start that pattern on any note that you want and play a major scale. So I just taught you all the major scales that are possible to play by teaching you one of them. So this is where music theory is just really efficient way of learning. Now you will have to go and actually figure it out if you actually want to play one, but you can. You don't have to have somebody tell it to you. You don't have to look it up in a book or anything like that because I gave you the pattern. And for singers, again, this is especially useful because like if we're having trouble hitting the high notes, Karen will just tell us, you know, let's scoot it down half a step and she'll give us a new note and we'll just sing it. And it's easy. An instrumentalist is going to have to relearn the whole thing or put on a capo or whatever. But we're just like, hey, this is great. We're singers. You know, we don't have to find keys or strings or anything like that. So it really makes sense for us to be able to think in this generic kind of a way. And so what this means is that the ABC kind of note names are maybe not the most useful things for singers who are really trying to learn to read music. And that is why people came up with another system called solfege, Solfege. And has everybody heard the song "Doe a Deer"? Doe a deer, a female deer. Everybody knows that song. That song is all about solfege. And so the first note of a C scale is C, and the first note of a D scale is D, and the first note of an E scale is E, but the first note of all those scales is just called Do. So any scale that you want to sing, major scale, is going to just start on Do. And the second note will always be Re. The third note will always be Mi. Fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you can sing through the song if you forget the order they go in, but it is also in a handout that I'm going to send to you all. And what this does is it detaches you from those specific notes and going, oh, I know what the interval from like a C to G sounds like. And you know, it's so twinkle twinkle. This is a great example. Twinkle twinkle. And if you learn C to G sounds like that, okay, great. Anytime I see a C and a G next to each other, I know it's going to sound like twinkle twinkle, and I can sing it. But then I see a D and an A next to each other, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what that's going to sound like. I better like find a piano and sort it out. Well, actually, D to A is also twinkle twinkle. Twinkle twinkle. It's just a little bit higher, right? So if you couldn't sing the low notes, you can maybe sing it now. Or if that's still too low for you, E and B. Twinkle, twinkle. Can you hear how the interval is always the same, even as we're moving everything up? That interval is called a fifth because if you just count up from the first note, so this is C, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we call it a fifth. But in solfege, these notes are do, re, mi, fa, so. Do, re, mi, fa, so, fa, mi, re, do. So once you are able to abstract out these notes into these sort of new names that apply to any key, then it's almost like you're only ever reading music in one key. It's as once you just identify what key it's in, that you do one step first, and then that's where your do is, and then everything else follows from there. Let me think. See, I think I should show. Let me look. Um, yeah. Okay. Let me just say one thing about the actual like printed music that we're looking at, because part of the point I want to make is it's not super important, actually. Um, so you guys are all in the choir. You at least know what written music looks like. And I'm sure you know the general premise that as notes move up vertically on the page, the pitches get higher, and as they move down, they get lower. And it's easy to find charts like this that show you which notes map onto which symbols. And there are sharps and flats. So I'm going to give you this handout, which you can study if you like. There are tons of like YouTube videos and things if you really want to get into it. It's great. This handout is actually from my harmonium course. I just co-opted it, so but it's close enough to what I wanted to share. There's also sort of a useful thing about how long the notes last, which again, maybe you're already familiar with. If you're not, this is worth studying, but we're not going to focus on it today. And this, because this is a harmonium handout, it only has the treble clef. So if you're a bass singer and you read in the bass clef, these aren't going to be your notes. But for what we're going to do in this class, it actually doesn't matter, because you're going to see how we're going to read a piece of music without even knowing what any of the notes are. So here's, in this picture I just showed, here's the C major scale with the pattern. Here's the D major scale with totally different notes, but showing the same pattern. And then this is just to kind of make the point that you can start anywhere you want, so there's no indication what this note actually is. But if you follow this pattern of intervals, you'll get a major scale. So it's actually really useful just to practice this almost like a drill. And if you don't like drilling exercises, I sympathize with you because I generally hate it. But this is pretty useful, and I've actually had fun just doing this, like on, biking to work and things like that. So let's just pick. So first of all, if you know what a major scale sounds like really well in your head, you might just do the whole thing. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And just pay real attention to how close the half steps are. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, fa. Can you hear how close those notes are to each other compared to the other ones? But what you see here is just practicing that scale kind of in pieces. And this is good just if you want to start with a small bite-sized piece, but also just to practice going up and down between different notes. So we would just sing, and feel free to sing along with me at home since we can't hear you anyway. Do, do, re, do, do, re, mi, re, do, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do. And we're always coming back to do, which our minds almost hold like a drone. Even unconsciously, when we're listening to music, we have a sense of where everything is going to resolve back to. And this helps kind of reinforce that. We keep hearing the do at the end of each of these phrases, and it helps us practice these little melodic bits so that later on, when we see one of these patterns in music, we go, oh, that's just do, re, do. And so if this is my do, I know I can just sing do, re, do, and that will be right. And what this exercise here does is it just keeps going one note higher up the scale every time through until the very last line is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. And by having specific syllables associated with these melodic patterns, it helps it ingrain them more in our memories. Just like you probably know that there are choir songs that you really remember. You have to sing the words. You can't just hum the alto part to it or something like that. Now, some people also like to have a little kinesthetic piece here, and so there are hand signals or hand signs that you can use uh, as you practice, just to give yourself a little muscle memory in there as well. And these are fun if you're teaching kids or anybody who just needs to be a little more kinesthetic about it. These, you don't do them with both hands. It just shows left and right versions for you. This is as you're looking at your own hand, but we don't need to get into that at the moment. Questions? How are we doing? I mentioned before, this whole class is an experiment, so feedback is totally fine. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to actually use this. So let's get a piece of music. Actually, let's not look at it first. Let's say your choir director comes up to you and says, "Hey, here's a new song." Find my key. Oh, how lovely is the evening, when the bells are sweetly ringing, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Some of you may have heard this before, but if you just heard this, major key or minor key? Major key, right? I already told you we're going to stick with major keys anyway, but you can tell it sort of sounds like a major key. And if you're going to try and find what key it's in, that whole last line is all one note. Ding dong, ding dong. So this is a pretty good guess, like this is the key we're in, right? And who cares what this note name is? This is our key. La. We're in the key of La, and it can have any letter at once. Okay? And so now your choir director says, "Okay, great, go home and practice that." And you're like, wait, I only heard it once. What am I supposed to do? And they go, "Okay, here's the sheet music." So now they give you, and I'll show it to you, my screen. Now they give you this. And you go, "Okay, so now I have to figure out how to read this." And I'm gonna put my guitar down here. You go, "Okay, I know it's in a major key, and I want to figure out what key is it in." And I know that the last note I heard, that sounded like, that sounded like the key it should be in. That sounded like where it was done, resolved, finished. That sounded great. And so you go, "Okay, let's just make a note of that." And like, carry a pencil with you, always mark up your choir music, anything that helps there. You go, "Hey, this whole last line is all the same note. That's easy. I can sight read that line. I'm set. I'm 1/3 of the way through the piece." But we're just going to call this do. It looks like do, but it's do. And if you already read music, you will know that that note happens to be an F. I don't care that it's an F. I'm calling it do. And in fact, in this key, it may be a little high for some people, so I'm not even going to sing it as an F. I'm going to sing it probably like maybe down here. Do. So now I'm just going to look, say, okay, where else in this piece does that note appear? And so it's on the very bottom space here, between the bottom two lines. So obviously this whole last line. But here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, and this line, nope, doesn't have any. So all of these notes are in the same space, so they're the same note. These are all going to be do. So we've sort of marked out our landmarks here. So if we get lost, we can always come back to our ding dong do. I forget if that was where I put my note, but that's fine. Okay, so let's look at the beginning. Here's our first note. It happens to be do. That's great. The next note is the very next line above it, and the next note is the very next space above that. So these are just going in nice steps up the scale. That means that if this is do, whoops, then this is re, and this is mi. Okay? Because we're not skipping anything in between. There's no space for another note in here in the scale. Do, re, mi. And now you go, oh, wait, I know what do, re, mi sounds like because I was practicing do, do, re, mi, re, do, and now I know that do, re, mi is the first three notes of this. And then, oh, here we're just back to a do again. And if I've been singing a lot of these ding-dongs, then I know where my do is, and I can come back to it relatively easily. How are we doing here? People okay with me? I don't see you when I'm in this mode, so I just gotta go back and peek. Okay, so now between these guys, there's a little bit more of a jump, right? So our scale practice wasn't that helpful. But what note would this be? We already counted up to mi is on this space here. And again, who cares what the actual letter note of this name of this note is? We're calling it mi. And this note is on the next line right above it. So what's after mi in the scale? It's fa. So if I'm not sure how to make this jump between these two notes, I can sing do, re, mi, fa, do, re, mi, fa, and sort of get a sense of where that note is, so that then I can go back and maybe take a running start up to it and go do, re, mi, do, fa, and get that jump. We're coming back down. If you look at all these two notes happen to be the same. Sometimes I'll mark notes that are the same just so I know I don't have to work hard at a certain point in my music. But otherwise, we're just going down in steps again, right? So we're just going right back down the way we came up. Mi, you hold on to that mi, re, whoops, it's a little hard to write in this. Re, do. And then whenever you're looking through a piece of music, it's always great to notice larger patterns, like look at this whole section. And look at this whole section. These are like exactly the same. So once you figure out what these two measures sound like, you don't have to do it all over again here. So do, re, mi, do, fa, mi, re, do, fa, mi, re, do. Is that sort of making sense how I got it? And now I'm assuming that we've put in a little time practicing the scale already. We obviously haven't had time to do that in the class, but if you had been at home practicing do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, you would be able to find those notes relatively easily just because you're used to it. Oh yeah, I know what do to re to mi to fa sounds like. Second line. What was this note? We're not starting on do again, but oh, we saw it here already. You know, if the note on this space is a mi once, it's going to be a mi the whole time. And again, this is going to be a fa. And ooh, we have a new higher note now. What's after fa? We could go back to our handout and say this is going to be so. And then this, it's on that same space as the mi. Then, ooh, even one more higher note. And look, okay, this is on the next line after the so. And if we look back at our scale, this is a la. This is as high as the whole thing's going to go. And then we look, we have the same sort of pattern descending down again. Now, when I'm actually reading a piece of music, I don't go through and mark every single do, re, mi on it, but I've practiced this. It's actually a good exercise to just, print out a spare copy to scribble on of your music and figure out where your do is, and then given that, just write in all the other syllables just for practice. But the more you do it, the more you'll be able to just see, oh yeah, those three notes all go in a line, just ascending right next to each other. They're all just adjacent syllables in our scale sequence. So if we're going to sing this line, and we had our let's say we remembered that do was here, and that was the last note we ended on, but that's not the last note we're going to sing. Do, but we can find where a mi would be just by going do, re, mi. Wait, is that right? Mi. So here's our mi, fa, sol, mi, la, so, fa, mi, la, so, fa, mi. And the last line we don't have to do because we know wherever we put our do, ding, dong, do, it's all the one note. So that's easy. How are we doing? You sort of with me? So you can see that it takes practice. Like it does require a familiarity with just the sequence of syllables, which you can learn pretty quick. Again, sing do a deer, a few dozen times, and you'll have it ingrained. Or just sing the scales a bunch, and then just training your ears to really hear that you're singing the scale in tune. Um, and not get sloppy with it, which it may help in the beginning to do it with an instrument if you have a harmonium or a guitar or whatever. Do, re, mi, fa. Really try and hear that fa, mi, fa. Those little half step intervals that are different from all the other ones. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the other really close half step interval. And if you get those, then often most of the other notes will fall into place. But it's really easy to get the scale in your head well, which again, like I said, I practice when I'm on my bike because if I know the scale, then I can work out everything else. Do, re, mi, re, do, re, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And it actually gets kind of fun. When we're back together as a choir, we should actually try that because I saw a YouTube video of a guy who had taught his high school choir to do this as a round. So one group goes do ti do, and then the other one starts in, and then another one starts in after them, and you just have this cascading flow of scales, which is actually really cool for something that's really built on such a simple format. Uh, and then that becomes good for just singing in harmonies. This song, if you didn't notice, it's a round, which is why there's the big 1, 2, 3s on next to the lines, because that shows you where the different parts would come in. So those of you who are quarantined with other people are welcome to teach it to them and try it out as a round and see how you like it. I told you I'm not covering minor scales so much here, but basically the principle works the same way. The pattern is just different. And for those of you who would like to study ahead on your own, you can take the same pattern of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do in that same order, but if you start on la, then it becomes a minor scale. And now the half steps are still going to be between mi and fa. So mi fa is always going to sound mi fa, and ti do is always going to sound ti do. But if it comes in a different place in the scale, you have la, that's too low for me, la ti do re mi. I'll just do it. La ti do re mi re do ti la, and it sounds minor now, right? So I'm not going to get into that in detail, but it basically still works. It's just if it's minor, then the home note is going to be called la instead of do. Let me send you guys the handouts that I was showing just so you have it. Now if I do this right, this should pop up in your Zoom window. Let's see. There's one of them.
Tandava,
yes.
Is it always pretty easy for most people to tell what the do note is on a song? Is that not too hard for people?
It's often doable. It sort of depends on how weird the music is. um, you know, we I like to tell people like pretend you're a bagpipe, and the bagpipes just have that going, and that's the drone the whole way through. And if you were going to play the bagpipe part on this given song, where would you along with it? Or you can like if you were playing harmonium, often the harmonium drones on, we call it the tonic, but the note of the key that it's in. Not always, so that's not strictly it. Um, and if we were, maybe more in person and could hear each other all well, I might quiz you more often, more here and see how it worked. Though, well, here, let's just try one. I'm gonna put you back on mute, Karen, and I'll play a few chords, and then I'll end, where it wants to end, and then at home on your own, hum the note that you think is the key that it's in. Okay? Is everybody humming a note? Is that your note? I see a lot of noddings. So, and like I said, the weirder the music gets, the harder it'll be to tell, but a lot of the time you can do it. If you're singing a harmony part in a choir, a lot of the times the basses will end on that note and the sopranos will end on the note. Again, not always, but it's very common for them to have that strong ending and give the middle voices, the tenors and the altos, the other harmony notes. So just be aware if you're singing a harmony part, you may not end on the key note, but probably the sopranos or the basses will. And you can sort of hear, like if I'm singing this, I might, as a tenor, have sung la 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 la. Maybe that was my tenor part, and I ended here. And it sounds nice with the chord, but it doesn't sound quite like that, which is really done. Does that sound different to you? Those two notes? And maybe the altos ended la on that note. Maybe this is the alto note, and it sounds good with the chord, but it's not that note or that note, which would be the one where it's really, really done. So that's just something to be aware of. If you're a harmony singer, you'll often not be singing that final note, but as a whole, you will hear the piece of music resolve back to a particular note. Yeah. Other questions? And I would also say, as a beginner, if you're practicing this, just go up to somebody who reads music and say, hey, what key is this in? Can you just circle that note for me? And then you go, okay, there's your do. And then you can do exactly what we did on your own, like find all the other do's, find which notes are next to them, find those little sequences and patterns, and work your way through it.
But often the problem is only you and Karen actually could tell everyone else what that key is.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying, like, ask somebody who's there when you're in choir rehearsal, and some others can too. Um, or just ask somebody, I think this is right. Do you think it's right? um, and or go online. The general music theory is the same whether you're singing, playing guitar, piano, whatever. So if you go watch YouTube videos on how to read music and things like that, it will apply. You don't need anything special. Don't go into the big complicated piano things with two hands and two staffs and all of that. Just learn the simple reed a treble clef kind of stuff, and you'll learn how also to identify what key is something is in just by looking at it. So that is entirely possible. And as Björn was saying, that's what Karen and I would do by looking at a piece of music. So that is an option, but for like the really quick intro course, give you something you can do on your own right now, it's not even strictly necessary. And you'll notice that I wasn't using note names in that example. We weren't actually singing it in the key it was written, which you probably didn't notice because it didn't matter. We were singing it in a comfortable key. You can do a lot without actually knowing the details of what's on the page in terms of ink. As long as you get the idea of how the music steps up and down, and you know your sequence of do, re, mi, etc., then you can really work out an awful lot on your own. Other questions? And I think it would actually be really fun to get together once in a while and take easy pieces of music and just try sight reading them together, and just as a group go, okay, this is we'll figure out what key it's in. We'll call this do. We'll look for the little patterns. We'll see how they relate to our little scale exercises and things like that, um, and uh, and then just read an actual piece of music and see how it goes, which I would be up to. It would probably be easier when we're in person again together because we can't actually sing anything at the same time right now. So all my school classes is just me singing at them and hoping they're singing along, which we could do, but it's less fun. Other questions? Did I see somebody starting to raise a hand? No. Did people get those files show up in the chat box there? Did that work for you guys? Okay, because go ahead and save those and look at them at your leisure. It has that song that we just did, "Oh How Lovely Is the Evening," and if the recording worked well, which hopefully it did, then I'll post it like a video on YouTube or something and find a way to um, get the files online and just linked from there as well, so other people can use it. Yeah. So that is my, hey, I came in under an hour. This is great. So that's like my snapshot of just how to approach music theory, how to look for patterns, and how to start taking patterns that you have learned and applying it to reading music. And I hope it wasn't scary because, again, remember the original point was like we start with music. We all know music, we all love music, we all sing music. This is great. We're just starting to think about it a little more and really look at what is happening, how is it put together. Let's give it some names so we can relate to it really explicitly in a way that we can then generalize to new situations, which I just think is a lot of fun. So I have that kind of a brain, but hopefully it's also useful to people. And if anybody wants to just work with this or has more questions, like please let me know anytime, because I love going through things like this. I find it fun. So any other music questions before we go? We're here? Okay. Thank you all for being here. I hope it was helpful. We'll share the video with the rest of the the choir. And it was wonderful to see you all. Take care.
Thank you, Dandava. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dandava.